It's Thursday, November 4th, 2021. My name is Ashton Ellett, here with another installment of the Two-Party Georgia Oral History Project, sponsored by the Richard B. Russell Library for Political Research and Studies at the University of Georgia. I'm here today with Chris Dowd. He is the founder and brains behind the Athens Politics Nerd, an independent media organization devoted to local news and politics here in Athens and Clark County. He's also a former board member and technical coordinator for Athens for Everyone, a local grassroots activist organization dedicated to advancing social and economic justice. Chris, thank you very much for joining me and taking part and talking some state and local politics.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't we begin? Why don't you tell me a little bit about your childhood and upbringing here in Athens?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Athens, sort of closer to Jackson County, wasn't really like in town. And let's see, I went to St. Joseph's, and actually went, in the downtown location. They've completely gotten rid of that now. But
right.
The church is still there. The old church is still there, which
yeah, the old sanctuary. They left.
Which was really interesting to see that again after so many years, because it was, they completely made it different. But then, like, it was always there the whole time, which I didn't quite realize, I guess.
Oh wow. So was your family Catholic?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Catholic.
Okay. So you grew up Catholic, but did you grow up in a political family or a family that was involved in politics at all?
I mean, we always talked about it some. I wouldn't say that they're involved in politics, but
right.
I guess a civically minded family, I would say.
Sure. So how did you first get interested in politics or involved, or because sometimes people get involved before they even get interested in politics?
I mean, that was, much later. Yeah, I didn't really pay any attention to politics really until, I guess, I was in my 30s. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I mean, it was in the early 2000s when I started to actually pay attention to stuff. Yeah, I think the first time I voted for president was 2004.
Oh wow, yeah. That was the first time I voted for president. Oh. Of course, I was 18. So.
Okay, yeah.
So what prompted you to become interested? What led to that flowering of interest in 2004, so to speak?
Well, I mean, it was kind of a series of things. I guess to start off, it was. I think a lot of people have this story, especially I guess people maybe a little younger than me, but I guess I also kind of fall into it as 9/11 was really kind of that kind of changed everything, and then then we started to invade Iraq for some of that was like a really big thing.
Sure. And
then that decade just kept going with revelations of that we were torturing people, and I just didn't. I never thought that. It wasn't really the country that I thought that I was living in.
I see.
It was wow, I didn't even think that was a possibility, And then the financial crash happened. So yeah, it was a series of things that really kind of I was like, wait, what's going on?
Okay. So it sort of bleeds over from the anti-war, anti-Iraq war interest into Occupy movement. What was really big after the financial crisis.
Although before, it's a little embarrassing, but before that I got really into Ron Paul. I don't know if you remember him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I could have been a Republican,
or a libertarian. So that's actually an interesting question. And if you're too embarrassed, that's fine. But what prompted your interest in Ron Paul or Ron Paul-esque politics?
Well, so I was, started to pay attention to politics, and so I was watching the debates, during the 2008 election. Mm-hmm. And the person who was speaking out against it the most was Ron Paul, against all these things that I was opposed to, and I wanted someone to speak up and to say the things that he was saying.
Right.
So that was really what sparked my interest.
So you weren't interested, say, in a Hillary Clinton or sort of the establishment Democrats that were. Although I guess President Obama was technically against the war in 2008.
Yeah, that's true.
So, you go. Tell me about the Occupy movement and how it manifested here in Athens. Because I remember I was in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, and I had seen it there in larger cities. But how did it manifest here in Athens?
Well, so I went down there. I believe it was like the first week they were doing it, and just like to see what was going on, because there was a little bit of overlap. I think people don't really realize that now, but like there was some overlap between like the Tea Party movement and the Occupy. There's like a little bit of overlap there, and so I was in that kind of overlap.
Interesting
thing, and so I like went down to see what was going on, and then there was one rally that I went to, and then I started to get to know people, and that's what kind of made me stick around. And I was always, on the sort of left of libertarianism. But,
sure.
And so but then I stuck around, and then I, some of my political views started to change. I started to learn more things about economics, for example. And,
So how did you go from, being interested in what was happening downtown at the Arch or at City Hall, and into something like, did you work on campaigns after that?
Let's see. Well, the first campaign that we did was so Tim Denson's campaign for mayor.
Right.
That was in 2014.
Has it really been almost 8 years ago now?
Yeah.
I feel old.
Yeah. And so that, Occupy was kind of winding down at that point.
Right.
But we still had like kind of the core group together, and we realized that no one was probably going to run against the current mayor, Nancy Denson, because everyone thought that she was unbeatable, and she did raise like a ton of money, and of course ended up winning. But we thought that someone should get in there and just to shake things up and to say some things that we thought needed to be said about poverty, for example, about focus on that, and on the transit system. We wanted to see that improved. And so Tim decided to run, and so I worked in his campaign at that time.
And how were you trying to, get the message out? You said Nancy Denson, Mayor Denson had all this money and everything. Describe that campaign, because I remember the campaign, but how would somebody in it, who worked in it, describe how it was run and what you think you achieved, even, as you said, in a losing effort?
Let's see how it was run. So we had just come out of this very horizontal organization in Occupy Athens. So it was a little different than that. Obviously, we had a candidate who had the final say on things.
Sure,
but
sure.
It was definitely a team effort where we had a bunch of people, in on those like strategy meetings and campaign meetings. Yeah, those are really fun. That was definitely a really fun time to be involved in, because we started off, struggling for legitimacy. That was a big test early on, and then people started to take us more seriously, and it was so much work. Oh my God, it was just like we were just working nonstop on that. It's like every day, just that was the hardest I've ever worked in my whole life, for sure.
Your first campaigns are for people who watch or listen who have never actually been involved in a campaign, it is draining, absolutely exhausting. And then you don't know what to do after the campaign, because you've been doing one thing for so long.
Right.
So clear something up for me. Did Athens for Everyone, was that a direct offshoot of Tim's mayoral campaign?
Yeah, I would say, not only it was a direct offshoot of the mayoral campaign, but also of Occupy Athens. Like, I consider it the same organization.
So
really.
There's a straight line.
Yeah,
from...
I consider that to be a
Interesting.
straight line. Although it was more, we had, an official nonprofit status and
right.
bylaws and everything. But besides that, it was
a highly structured
Yeah, it was much more structured with like officers, positions and everything. But besides that, it was as close as we could make it, I would say.
How would you describe Athens for Everyone's politics and its mission?
I would say well, I think the core of it was sort of democratic socialist, what sort of like in the Bernie Sanders kind of mold. But we tried to be more inclusive than that, and not just be a strictly left organization. But basically, we wanted anyone center left to left is what we tried to be.
A big tent, liberal to leftist organization.
Yes, right.
So you wanted it to be more than just a DSA, but
Exactly.
was there overlap between, say, the local Democratic Party, or alternatively, was there antagonism with sort of a local Democratic Party organization?
Well, yeah, no, I wouldn't say that there was antagonism
Okay.
because the Democratic Party locally didn't really exist at that time. I mean, that was. Yeah, I think there are two things that made Athens for Everyone so successful. The first one was that we were pretty much the only game in town. Like the Athens anti-discrimination movement didn't exist. The Democratic Party didn't exist. Indivisible didn't exist. Like for activism, we were pretty much it.
Yeah.
And then of course Trump getting elected, that kind of supercharged everything on the liberal to left spectrum. And since we were there first, we kind of got a lot of people coming in. Like our membership tripled like in a couple months.
After 2016?
Yeah, after the election.
Yeah. So what was your role in A4E?
So I was the secretary originally, and then
The most thankless job in the organization.
and then like the operations coordinator is what it was called. Yeah, and then later on the technical coordinator it was called. Anyway.
Well, what were you responsible for as the direct, the technical coordinator?
It depends on when exactly we're talking about. But like I made and managed the website. I made and managed our database. Originally I was doing the email list too. While other people took that over later. Some social. Yeah, I mean I was pretty heavily involved in a lot of the different aspects of it, I would say.
How heavily involved was Athens for Everyone in campaigns and elections, as opposed to sort of building grassroots support for specific issues or topics?
Well, I mean, in the 2018 election, we were pretty involved. We did like organize volunteers to knock on doors, make phone calls and stuff. But I think that was effective. But probably the most effective stuff we did was, I think we got some flack for this, but we like graded the commissioners. If you remember that?
No, yeah.
That was, I think, very effective.
That was within progressive politics. That may have been something new, but conservative groups. Conservative grassroots groups have been doing that since the 60s and 70s. Those scorecards, which do get a lot of attention, and I remember seeing them in the newspaper and online and things like that. You mentioned the names of Athens Anti-Discrimination League and Indivisible. How much cooperation was there with those progressive organizations post-Trump? Post-2016?
There was quite a bit of cooperation, especially with the Athens anti-discrimination movement. We so like the first rallies against General Beauregard's downtown, like that. Those are pretty much co-organized.
Really?
Yeah, by the two groups. 'Cause, I mean, they weren't even calling themselves the Athens anti-discrimination movement at that time. That name came later. It seemed like it was a Black Lives Matter organization. Like, we never.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of what it came out of, but it just kind of took the name of Athens Anti-Discrimination Movement.
Okay.
It's basically a Black Lives Matter organization. From my perspective, I don't want to speak for them.
Sure. I understand. So, because the Russell Library is the institutional home for or repository for the Athens for Everyone records. The organization recently changed its status. what is the state of Athens for everyone, and then from that, what's the state of the progressive movement here in Athens?
Well, so what happened was it was a lot of internal fighting after. So when we had a goal, we were all together on the same page, and then as soon as we kind of the progressive candidates kind of won big in the local election 2018, there was just a lot of infighting, and that eventually led to the organization dissolving. Pretty much, the short answer of that.
Without getting too in the weeds, you were talking about all these disagreements. What were the disagreements over?
Oh wow! You want me to get into that?
You don't have
see.
to if you don't want to, but I was just wondering what could be so serious in a town that's as progressive as Athens. What divides progressives?
Oh, any number of things. I mean, it's we're really good at fighting ourselves for sure. I mean, I think, let's see, part of it was just kind of like a power vacuum in the organization when when Tim Denson became a commissioner. That definitely left a space to be filled, and no one was really able to fill those shoes basically after he left. So that kind of destabilized it a little bit, and then there was a whole bunch of people kind of coming into the organization, especially on our Facebook discussion page, who were primarily motivated by racial justice, which of course is a wonderful goal, so the major division, at least on that Facebook forum, maybe not in real life, but on
Sure.
the Facebook forum, the major division was people who were primarily focused on racial justice, and then the people who were primarily focused on maybe environmental justice or especially women's rights, reproductive justice, stuff like that. So that was definitely a dividing. People were fighting over that, and just all kinds of really sort of divisive posts. And there wasn't any real moderation of that forum.
Interesting.
And, which I wanted there to be moderation. I kept advocating for we need to, people need to be respectful of each other just to have a functioning organization. So
Sure.
Yeah.
So basically, you have an issue where you said early on that when you had a goal, everything was great. What was the goal?
Oh well, the goal was achieving progressive change by winning. First of all, by advocating for our policies
Right.
down at City Hall, which I think was really effective, and then also winning elections.
Which, as well, we'll talk about in a little bit, was very effective here in Athens. So it seems like what you're saying is after 2018, the power vacuum and those advocating for their most important issue, because obviously those who advocate racial justice usually also support things like environmental justice, economic justice, things like that. But it was basically what's going to take the priority. Is that fair?
Somewhat, and it's hard to, for me, it's hard to say how much was really genuine about what they were saying, or if they were just trying to divide people. but sometimes,
Social media wouldn't do that.
It's really not the best place to have these kinds of discussions. I almost think it'd be better if we never even had a discussion forum, honestly. But sometimes they would say stuff like there was one post in particular that drove me just up the wall crazy. Was as someone in there said that the cottage shouldn't. It was like a scam, and that it's just they're just taking money from black fathers basically, and to give it to these women who are running the scam. I could not believe someone had posted that, and that
A rather borderline libelous
Yeah, no, it was
statement.
very, especially since the cottage was like one of the partners that we had been
Yeah.
working with. Like we had a, sexual assault prevention initiative, and so yeah, it was just, anyway, it was bad.
Moving on. So how do you go from being active in politics, campaigning, working, and organizing to saying, I want to cover local politics?
Okay, so I pretty much knew that my time, at least in A3, was coming to an end, and at the same time they had. I believe it was Mariah Parker who kind of led this initiative to push for the work sessions to be televised and put on YouTube, and that happened. And they got new cameras at that time, and everything was in HD, and it was really nice. And they had all the meetings on YouTube, which I thought was just wonderful. And so I watch a lot of YouTube videos, like
Sure.
history and politics videos on YouTube, and so I was like, well, I could do that for local politics, and that's what I started doing, and that was the original idea. But then I realized that like most people actually just want articles so that they can skim through really quickly, and they don't want to sit down to watch a video. So I've mostly shifted over to writing articles at this point.
I see.
But the original idea was to kind of like just edit the commission meetings to be more digestible, like 5 to 10 minute little videos.
Which is, if anybody's ever been to a local government meeting, that's quite the service. You provide the Cliff's Notes version of the meeting. So, do you with your art, what are all the platforms that people can find Athens Politics in?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and I just started a podcast recently. There's a couple episodes up.
Right.
I hope to have another one up soon, and that's on just pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts, like iTunes,
Sure.
Google Podcasts, Spotify.
So, are you a news source for all consumers of local politics, or are you directly focusing your efforts for progressives in Athens?
Well, I would say both. I mean, definitely I'm focusing my efforts towards progressives, but I also try to just, record like things like voting records of commissioners, and that's, factual, just neutral information that anyone might, because you can't get that information anywhere else. As far as I know, it's still the only place where you can find that.
Right.
So I think it should be useful for anyone.
So you said you're working on, you've worked in progressive politics. In Georgia, branching out into analysis portion of the interview. Are all our Democrats here in Georgia progressives, or is there is there still a strain of moderation or conservatism, sort of post 2018, post Stacey Abrams?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there are moderate Democrats, sure, that still exists, definitely.
So we look back. You talked about the Trump era being sort of a turning point for Athens, for everyone. But what do you think the impact of Trump was on Georgia politics more broadly?
Ooh, I mean that's a good question. Let's see. Definitely had a big impact on the Republican Party for sure, and yeah, also on the Democratic Party. I mean, it was a really motivating force for sure. Like I said earlier, like the Athens Reverend membership tripled. Like it was all of a sudden it was just a completely different game for us, and I think for Democratic politics generally, I think it totally changed the game, and I think that's why Biden won Georgia. I don't think that he would have won if it was someone else besides Trump.
What do you think, is that because of just the visceral reaction to Trump, or is it because you mentioned you were the only, A4E was the only game in town, but in 2014, 2015, but then you have Indivisible and all these other groups. So was it just a full-on mobilization effort by progressive groups and Democratic groups?
Yes, definitely that helped a lot for sure. Yeah, and I think a lot of but I do think a lot of the motivation behind that, it wasn't just like generally we want Democrats to win, although that has played some part of it. But yeah, we really need to get organized because we have a person that we consider to be a threat.
You mentioned the Republican Party. What do you think President Trump's impact or effect on the Georgia Republican Party has been?
I mean, I guess there's this. So Democrats kind of have things that we fight over, and then Republicans also have some splits. And one of them is kind of like the more business-friendly wing of the party. I think Nathan Deal fit into that category. And I think, yeah, there's a lot of differences between that wing and then the Trumpian wing.
Right, the Deal, Isaacson.
Yeah.
Sort of the quote Chamber of Commerce
Right.
style
Yeah, that's
Republicans.
a good way to phrase that.
Right.
Yeah, they're not super ideological. They they want to support business interests, and they want to make Georgia a friendly state for business. And
The
that's
number
really
one state to do business.
Yeah, exactly. And Nathan Deal, he had some good criminal justice initiatives that I think sort of the Kemp Trump wing. I don't know, they're not even the same thing, but that.
Yeah, that's a whole. I mean, that's a whole conversation on whether the governor's trying to obviously toe the line very carefully between the two. I say two. There are innumerable factions and camps in both parties. But we were talking about mobilizing, and I think for a lot of people, the first real test was obviously John Ossoff, who was running in the 6th congressional district. But here in Athens, there were 2 special elections to fill 2 state house seats, the 117th and the 119th. Deborah Gonzalez versus Houston Gaines, and then Jonathan Wallace versus 2 or 3 different Republicans down in mainly in a Oconee-based district. And lo and behold, the 2 Democrats won those races outright. How do you explain that, especially since they haven't been held by Democrats since 2018?
I think it was a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of I think, this is the Trump effect. People were really, really motivated at that time. And in a low turnout election, I think if you have one base that's supercharged up and ready to go, another base that, we just won, maybe we don't really need to do anything,
Right.
That's a huge advantage.
Especially in districts that are drawn to favor Republican candidates. Because obviously the 118th with Spencer Fry is solidly Democratic count. I don't even know that Representative Fry has had a opponent.
I don't think so.
Ever, maybe. I think he ran against a Libertarian fellow the first time.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Whose
name?
Carter Kessler.
All I can remember were the black and yellow signs. That's all. That's all I can remember. But yes, it was Carter Kessler back in 2012. So 2018, we've hinted at it and we've talked around it and everything. What did the 2018 local elections mean for Athens politics? How would you describe the administration of Nancy Denson and the commission before 2018?
I would say, she's a Democrat, but I would say she's definitely in like the kind of like Chamber of Commerce, business-friendly sorts of Democrats. So I think there are still Democrats like that, and I don't know if it's fair of me to blame all these high-rise student apartments on her, but I know that they happened during her administration. I know that she wasn't trying to stop them from happening, for example. And I think some people do blame her for that. So, yeah, it was, it was a lot. I mean, compared to the way things are now, the meetings are a lot shorter. There are a lot fewer items on the agenda, a lot fewer meetings, and the topics generally were, supporting business in this way or, or that way, and more about like development issues, I think, was what she was focused on.
Okay. So, Nancy Denson had 2 terms, elected 2010, defeated another progressive, Gwen Looney, who was a former mayor, reelected in 2014, defeating Tim Denson. So she's not running. Mayor Denson doesn't run in 2018. Who are the candidates to replace Mayor Denson in 2018?
Oh, that was Kelly Gertz,
Uh-huh.
who ended up winning. And then that was Harry Sims as well. He was a commissioner for a long time, and he ran. And then there was the third candidate, Richie Knight, who I don't even know what's happened to him at this point, but I think he got like 9% of the vote. But so he wasn't super relevant.
9.2%. I mean, if I was giving out prizes, that's very good, especially now that we're 3+ years past that election. So right, as you noted, it's essentially a 2-person race between Kelly Gertz and Harry Sims, who were both on the commission at that time. How did the 2 candidates differ in their proposals or their platform, so to speak?
Kelly Gertz, I would say, is a progressive. I think maybe he's slightly less progressive than people think. I think he's really pretty moderate. He's like a center-left kind of guy. And then I would say Harry Sims is a conservative Democrat. Mm-hmm. Sort of in the Nancy Denson mold, I would say.
And Harry Sims is an African American,
Yes.
commissioner
Yes.
from East Athens. So the race comes down, and it's Harry Sims 30%, and Kelly Gertz about 60%. Was that margin of victory surprising to you?
I mean, I guess maybe I thought it would be slightly closer, but I think that I think that Harry Sims kind of maybe, he was coming to the end of his career. It's like, oh, maybe I'll run for mayor. In a way, I'm not sure he was really even expecting to win, or maybe he didn't work as hard as he would have needed to win, or something.
Right.
And I think Kelly Gertz was, very motivated and working really hard for it, basically. I think that was probably the difference.
So, you've described Mayor Gertz's politics, or at least, your impression of his politics. What do you think his biggest, how has he changed the tone versus, say, the Nancy Denson
I think the biggest difference is how hard that he works. I think they have so many more meetings. It's exhausting sometimes. I'm trying to cover all these, and I can't imagine what it's like for the commissioners, especially the ones who were used to sort of the Nancy Denson style of things, and now all of a sudden, like, they have 2 voting meetings every month now. They have, 1 million executive sessions. They have retreats and it's just so many more. It's like at least double meetings, like at least, and the agenda is always packed with all these items they have to vote on, and I think that is the biggest difference, hands down.
So during Mayor Denson's administration, you described it as mainly construction, development related issues, business promotion, et cetera. What are the issues and topics that have manifested themselves now? During the
I think
Gertz
those development issues, economic development, is still
sure.
on the agenda for sure. But then also we have all these other items like, police oversight and things that we just voted on at the past meeting, as far as the Human Relations Commission, equity, things like that. A lot more of those kinds of things, and environmental issues as well is a much bigger topic now. We have the 100% Athens initiative, where we have a goal where they're working on a plan to reach 100% renewable energy, which is very ambitious. So we'll see if we're able to do that. I think yeah, those issues are definitely big, and yeah, they weren't really present before.
Well, of course, the mayor obviously drives the agenda on the commission, but there are commissioners, 10 commissioners. How did the commission change in 2018 as opposed to before?
Let's see. Well, we have, I mean, at this point we have, Democratic Socialist members of the commission. We've got 3 of them now, although it was only 2 of them in 2018 I got on. Yeah, that has really changed the complexion of the commission, even just their presence, but also some of the other people who have switched, they've switched to be more progressive as well. And like Russell Edwards, for example, Carol Myers, people like that are more progressive than the people that they replaced, for sure.
So who are the members of the Democratic Socialists of America?
There's 3 of them on there right now. It's Commissioners Jesse Houle, Tim Denson, and Mariah Parker.
Oh, that's right, because Jesse was elected 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why do you think, I know what the answer is going to be, but why do you think these generally younger, although Ovita Thornton is of a different generation than, say, Tim Denson,
right,
or Mariah Parker, why do you think these progressive candidates were able to win, and win handily? Like Tim Denson, for example, won without a runoff in a 3-person race that included an incumbent. Mm-hmm. So what do you think fueled that progressive victory?
I think there are a couple of things. The first thing would be, I think Athens has been, especially in recent years, has been more progressive than its government. I think that's definitely part of it. There really was, people really wanted to hear politicians talk like that, and they hadn't heard that. People didn't really even have platforms to speak of before that, and so when you get people who are really ambitious and want to accomplish these things, I think that's attractive to people. And then the other reason I do think, they are ideologically driven, but that really gives you more motivation that I think some of the other candidates don't have, and I think because of that they're willing to work harder. Mm.
So what do you think, we're now going on almost 3 years, well, we're past 3 full years of say, a progressive-dominated commission here in Athens. What do you think the biggest success, in your opinion, of this new government has been?
I would say it's the most recent budget that they passed. So it's a bunch of different things, but I would say that is the one. If I can call that one thing, that would be the biggest.
What are the budget priority points that you would point to?
The first one is fare free transit. That finally has kind of. Hopefully, it'll be around forever. I think it's intended, at least with that vote, it was intended to be long lasting.
Right.
And things like the alternative response team, which is a non-police crisis response unit that they're trying to form right now. Mm-hmm. It's like in the process of being formed. So that was modeled after the CAHOOTS program in Oregon, Eugene, Oregon.
Another college town.
Yeah, and so it's like when you call 911, there'll always be the chance of this, unarmed, team that of like social workers and healthcare professionals who will show up instead of people with guns.
Was that a direct result of the George Floyd protests?
Yeah,
in 2020?
I think it was. Yeah, absolutely. I think that was definitely on their mind because of that, for sure. And other things in the budget would be, paying all ACC employees $15 an hour. That was a big win. Previously, because the living wage, if you look on like the MIT's living wage calculator, that's gone up so much recently in recent years. So, I mean, I know we were kind of celebrating when they were all being paid, like I think it was like $11.60 an hour, like
yep.
just a few years ago. But now, I think the living wage has gone up to like 14 something.
Yeah,
so.
I can remember. This would have been under the Obama administration. I think it was one of the State of the Unions, and President Obama, who was a very progressive, a very liberal Democrat, suggesting minimum wage be raised to $9. And you think how far the progressive wing of the Democratic Party has really driven that issue. That now $15, it seems, is pretty standard talking point for most Democrats, not just a Bernie Sanders or something like
right.
that.
Right, and I think
not that Bernie Sanders is actually a Democrat; he's a Democratic socialist, but for all intents and purposes, he's a Democrat.
right. Yeah, and I think it's because the party is getting more progressive, but also it's because people need that to live. I mean, I think they really do.
So we talked about some of what you see as the successes. Have there been any, in your mind, disappointments or missed opportunities so far?
I mean, there's always little things.
Sure.
Definitely one sort of mistake that I think they made. There was one development I think they approved out on Lexington Road that was probably not a good move. But I mean, I think it's just this really large development that's kind of out of scale, and I think the people around it don't like it a lot. And they did that because their goal is to get more affordable housing. I think the developer offered them like a few units or something of affordable housing, but they probably could have gotten more, or maybe they should have been willing to wait for someone else to come along. Maybe they would have gotten a better deal. And I think it's sort of the urgency that they feel to make changes like that, and to really, show that they're trying, and they really are trying to keep housing affordable. It has maybe led to them jumping at an opportunity that they maybe shouldn't have.
Right.
And also, like, we don't have a policy around that yet, an inclusionary zoning policy. So that really needs to be worked out first, and then things like this won't really happen as much anymore.
So we're talking, here in Athens, progressives have taken, charge, and we mentioned how the Democratic Party has shifted to become more progressive, even here in Georgia. Looking back at Stacey Abrams and her gubernatorial campaign and her work on the ground, what do you think that's meant for the Democratic Party, but also just progressives in general?
The candidacy of Stacey Abrams?
Right.
I think it's given people hope. I think it's given people something to work. And this was before Biden won, and that Warnock and Ossoff won. So
Right.
At that time, really, any kind of glimmer of hope was really important to people, I think, and I think she provided that because, she would be the first African American woman to be governor. Mm-hmm. That's a really big deal, and to get as close as she did, and then maybe she will be, maybe this year or next year, that she'll win it.
Although that's, if the results from this Tuesday seem to have put some damper on Democratic hopes, but again, off-year elections are off-year elections, so who knows? Anybody who bets on politics is either a smarter person than me or a braver person than me. So who knows? But in 2020, we can obviously talk about Biden and Trump, but the progressive streak seemed to continue in 2020 here in Athens, and the race that stands out in my mind was the sheriff's race. Right. Did you follow the sheriff's race between the incumbent Ira Edwards and then the challenger John Q. Williamson, or John Q. Williams?
Yeah, I definitely followed that one for sure. Yeah, that was another example of sort of a conservative Democrat against a more progressive Democrat, and the progressive won that one as well. And I think, yeah, that's just what people want right now, especially in law enforcement, I would say, on the Democratic side.
Sure.
And of course, in Athens, whoever, if you win the Democratic primary, you're almost definitely going to win.
Yeah, at the local level, that the old saying in Georgia politics is that the primary was tantamount to election, so it's old tantamount. So, how did conservatism and progressivism, how did it show itself in that race? What were the issues that divide? What issues could divide two sheriff's candidates?
I think one of the big issues was, first of all, the jail is kind of a mess, and that was kind of a big deal in that race. As far as I'm not sure they were divided on this. It's just that
One person was in charge.
Yeah, one person was in charge, so it was a little bit of a liability for that person, because if the jail is not in great shape. So that was one thing for sure that was there. And then other issues that they I think brought up during the race were some of the campaign contributions that Ira was getting from like bail bondsmen and contractors, like jail contractors who might be hired by Clark County, and so that was definitely an issue.
This is sort of an aside, but I'm from Illinois originally, and I remember moving down to Georgia and driving out. We used to live out on off of Lexington Road, and you would drive by and you would see bail bonds offices and things, and you would also see inmates working on the roads. And what gives there? Why are there bail bonds, and why do inmates work on the roads, whereas in Illinois you would never see inmate labor on doing road work or something like that?
Why are there bail bondsmen? Yeah.
Well, I guess that's one question, but the more pressing question is about prison inmate labor.
Okay. Yeah. I mean that's something that we do. I think it's a legacy of slavery, I would say. That, yeah, because we don't pay those people anything. I think if we did pay them, I think people would look at that differently. But yeah, I think they think that if you did something wrong and you're in jail, that you need to pay back your debts to society, and and you shouldn't be paid anything. And I do think that that comes from slavery, I think, because it is mostly black people doing that. Yeah.
Is that an issue that has come before the commission, or that you expect would come before the? It has.
That there really isn't much that they can do about that. They could completely end the program, but they're not allowed to pay the inmates anything for their labor. The state has prevented that. Yeah, they're really adamant about that. Like, not even with local dollars, you couldn't do it. Which I don't fully understand, but that is the law right now.
Interesting.
And so they completely end the program, but I think that people want to get out and out of their cell every now and then and do some work, do something productive. And I think they can earn credits towards their release too.
Okay.
As well. So yeah, I mean, it'd be a hard call for me to completely end that. I don't know how I think about that, but
it was just one of those things. Since we were talking about the jail and the sheriff, that always. My parents both taught criminal justice. My dad worked in jails. My brother's a police officer. My brother-in-law is a police officer. So it's just one of those things that I've always thought about, the difference between states and localities and things like that.
Yeah, like saying that they would have to, I guess they would just stay in their cell the whole time. I'm not sure if that would be better.
Right. So we've mentioned President Biden and Donald Trump. Were you surprised when Biden won Georgia?
Sorry, can we go back
Yeah,
real
yeah.
quick to the sheriff's race? There was one important issue
Sure.
that I did forget, which was that of cooperation with ICE.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
The
that was another issue that I just wanted to.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So the previous sheriff had wanted to, and did actually, what was involved in this program where if you couldn't prove your documentation status that you're here legally, then they would call up ICE and ICE would come and pick you up, and that involved holding people even after they were supposed to be released, that they could be held in jail, which is unconstitutional actually. And so I think that's why they stopped doing it, because they realized, we were actually legally liable for this. And so they eventually stopped cooperating in that way. But I was pretty clear that if there's a way to do it legally, that he would, and that definitely angered a lot of people.
Sure. So we're still in 2020. Looking back at the election and talking about how the resistance to President Trump manifested itself in Georgia. Were you surprised by the result on election night, or I guess it was technically the morning after the election when Vice President, now President Biden, carried the state?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. Yeah, I didn't really expect that to happen. We always, you can look at the demographics and you can say eventually Georgia will turn blue if everything keeps going at this rate. But when it happened, I think it was still a surprise for me. Yeah, it was.
Were you equally surprised when Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff won those runoffs?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I knew it would be close. I thought maybe one would win, one wouldn't. I wasn't sure, but yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise.
So there's one more major progressive or major race in 2020 that we haven't really talked about, which was the district attorney's race, which was quite a saga about it even happening. Walk us through why there was even an election, and why it didn't happen sooner, and why it happened when it did. So what happened with that?
Okay, so the old district attorney, Ken Malden, I assume, I don't know this for a fact, but I assume that he would have run again if, but Deborah Gonzalez announced her candidacy, I think kind of early, if I remember, and then he was like, oh, well, I'm not going to run now, and so he dropped out. And then for a while, it seemed like there was going to be a primary, at that time, or a special election. I'm trying to remember this. And then his assistant DA ran, but that election was canceled.
Right. Which I think was a relatively new law.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so there was a law in 2018 that gave the governor the ability to cancel these races, and he did that once before. But it's only in the case when an incumbent resigns and there's an open seat. So instead of having an election, you would just appoint someone, and then that person would serve until the next election. And so I guess it would be two years down the line. It wouldn't be 4 years. It would be 2 years. It's not a full term, but yeah. And so he did that once in, I believe it was Douglas County, and that was a woman of color who was trying to become DA in that one. And then in this one, we have Deborah Gonzalez, who is Latina, and yeah, he canceled that election, and she was determined to fight that. She was not going to put up with that, and so yeah, she raised a bunch of money to pay lawyers' fees, and then she took that all the way to the Georgia Supreme Court and won. And they determined that was unconstitutional, and so the law was struck down. And so they ended up having an election.
So they have a 3-person race, 2 Democrats and an independent.
Right.
So obviously, we know that Deborah Gonzalez won that race, but describe the dynamics, because the Western, for those people who don't know, the Western Judicial District is Clark County and Oconee County. So how did the election break down along those lines?
Okay. Well, most people in Athens went for Deborah Gonzalez, and then most people in Oconee County went for Chafin, who was the independent. And kind of the guy in the middle, who was the most moderate candidate, really didn't have a base of support, and so didn't advance on to the runoff. And since Athens is bigger than Oconee, Deborah almost won outright, but not quite. So they had to have that runoff.
Right, which turned out pretty much the same way, a narrow victory.
Mm-hmm.
What's been there was some fallout from I think it's fair to say some political fallout from Deborah Gonzalez's election, especially in Oconee County. There's some talk of trying to split off and create a new Oconee judicial district. In your opinion, what's fueled that?
It's definitely Deborah Gonzalez's election. They're like, who is this person? This is not who we want as our DA, and they're worried that she won't prosecute people, which is, I think, completely untrue. But there's that concern, and so they're like, we want someone who's tough on crime, and so they're trying their best to get out of the Western Circuit, either to join another circuit or to make their own. And that was kind of shot down by the judicial redistricting body, the state level body. They said that it wasn't feasible to have them join any other circuit, and then making their own circuit would just be too small, so it just wasn't worth the expense of having, a whole DA and staff to have to prosecute just a few cases a year. So they're kind of stuck in Athens circuit there. And then I can understand being upset, because they don't really have they're a minority of voters, but they think very differently than people in Athens do. So yeah, if I was in their case, I would definitely. I don't think I would go so far as to want to break off of a whole circuit, but definitely I would not be happy about the situation.
Right. So we just had it was just election day here in Athens. I think the only race. The only thing on the ballot was the education special purpose local option sales tax. It's late on a Thursday, and folks like to lay on the horn when it's time to go home, apparently. So that, like most local option sales taxes, passed overwhelmingly here in Athens. But Oconee County, as you just mentioned, had their own transportation sales tax that was up for a vote, and it was shot down. Mm-hmm. You have an entire YouTube video on this, which is very informative. But why are the political cultures so different in Athens versus Oconee County? What explains that willingness to, say, impose a tax here in Athens versus imposing a tax in Oconee County?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of things that are different. The political culture is different. The demographics are very different. Oconee County is sort of a more affluent, white area, and so, I guess that they're just not interested in taxes, and they don't feel the need to. I guess they don't feel a pressing need for infrastructure, which I imagine that they have. But if I could talk to the the people working in their county government, I bet you they really wanted that to pass. But I guess they'll feel like they'll be okay, and they don't. And maybe if things really start to crumble, they'll probably change their mind on that, I imagine. But
maybe when you staff up, you can become the Athens area politics nerd, and you can cover Athens and Oconee County meetings. Although with how much the Clark County Commission meets, you would need an entire second or third person to start covering any more.
I think the first thing I'd want to do is start covering the school board more here in Athens.
Which is
Before I break out, diversify.
which is a whole other conversation. School board politics, which is really something sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very interesting, very informative, but incredibly contentious sometimes. So looking ahead to 2022, as a political observer and a progressive, what are your thoughts looking ahead at the state of politics in Athens and more broadly in the state?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens to the Republican Party. Like is Herschel Walker able to win? And is he able to beat Warnock? So was it kind of a fluke in 2020 that Democrats took the state, or was it just about time as far as the demographic changes? So that is definitely an open question. I think that I'd be really interested to know the answer to.
Right.
And then I guess locally, it's sort of similar. Can progressives hold on to, I wouldn't say a dominant position, but a very influential position where they have the numbers, especially with the mayor seems to be usually siding with them if it's ever 5-5.
Right.
So yeah, so that even if just one seat changes on that could throw off that balance.
That's true.
So we'll have to see what happens there, and and can Kelly Girtz win again, which I imagine that he can, but of course nothing's ever for sure. So
the only thing that is for sure is that nothing is for sure.
Yeah.
Even in Athens. So what's the next big project for you as the Athens politics nerd?
Well, I have started this podcast. Yeah, I've just been thinking about what is the best way to get this information out to people. Definitely, I think articles have been successful. Maybe the videos in some cases have not been as successful, and they just take so much time to make. So
very labor intensive.
Yeah. So I think a podcast is maybe a nice middle ground if that could take off, because that would let me just talk more informally about things. And so if people are interested in that, yeah, they can find that on Spotify, iTunes. But although another project I've been working on, it's not really related to local politics.
Sure.
It's about financial history of the U.S. That's something that I've been working on. I actually have a separate YouTube channel for that because I realized it's not really connected in any way. But that is something that I definitely got interested in, sort of the Occupy movement.
Sure.
And, so that I'm trying to lay out my thoughts as far as things like the gold standard, the Federal Reserve, things like that.
Well, I mean, if you can make the bank wars interesting, Jackson versus Nathaniel Biddle, and you can get college freshmen to understand it. It would be an incredible resource for anybody teaching survey U.S. history classes, because I can always remember teaching, and I don't know why I always felt the need to apologize, but it was like, in class, I'm sorry, we have to talk about taxes and tariffs today. Although, taxes and tariffs, that was, what is old is new again in American politics. But it's great. Well, Chris, anything else you'd like to record for posterity? Not that you couldn't record it yourself, obviously, with all your different platforms.
Nothing that comes to mind.
Sure.
But thanks for having me.
No. Thanks for coming in on this incredibly dreary, drizzly, cold fall day here in Athens. But Chris Dowd, thank you very much on behalf of the Richard B. Russell Library. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.